Welcome. This is our scheduled Accelerate Action. Women Negotiating a Better Future Through Mediation was the title of the session, and it was for International Women's Day or Week. But Cyclone Albert decided that he was going to interfere with a number of our presenters. So we're rescheduled to now. Thank you, those that could come along live, and to those that are watching us on recording. I'm Joanne Law, Director of Mediation Institute and co-founder of Interact Support, a social enterprise not-for-profit that helps people that fall through the gaps in other dispute resolution services. And I might just hand over to the rest of our panel to introduce yourselves. I'll just go around quick ones. So Dee, would you like to introduce yourself, please?
Yeah, great. Thank you so much, Joanne. And great to meet yourself, Laura, and also Nicole, and to be a part of this. Thank you for the audience for coming here. My name's Dee Hardy. I'm an FDRP, also a counsellor. I've got a little bit of a brief history of property development and design and project management, which goes back about 34, almost 40 years ago now, showing that. And mediation has been a core part of my business and also my personal life, to be frank. The art of being able to listen with the intent to understand and navigate conversations which might vary from your perspectives, and being able to navigate a pathway through that has always been a mine. And of course, formalising through the Mediation Institute and becoming an FDRP was obviously the stage where I'm at now. And I'm looking forward to sharing some tips, techniques, strategies, talking with my colleagues here, and hopefully we can shed some light and maybe give you something as a takeaway at the end of our session today.
Wonderful. Thank you, Jade. And Nicole, would you like to introduce yourself?
Hi, thank you. Yeah, I'm Nicole. I'm a mediator and also an educator in nonviolent communication. I've got background in sociology and in linguistics, so I'm very interested in cultures and how we relate to each other and in the language that we use to relate. And I kind of, in my earlier life, had a lot of difficulties with communication. So discovered nonviolent communication, and it's an amazing mixture of self-development and self-reflection and just some really simple practical tools for having better relationships. A lot of my focus is on personal relationships with partners, with families, within community. So that's where I focus. And looking forward to sharing some tools here tonight in this audience.
Thank you. And Laura?
Thanks very much. Thanks, Joanne. And it's lovely to be here tonight. So I'm Laura Mason, and I run a mediation practice focusing on workplace mediation. Primarily, I'm not a family mediator, as Nicole and Dee are. And I've only been in formal mediation for the last 12 months or so, but I reckon I've been facilitating and mediating my whole life. I came out of corporate Australia, where I had various executive roles in some of the largest companies in Australia, and experienced firsthand the challenges that team members experience in the workplace, and some of the skills that are lacking in leaders, in team members, and really is a passion for me to help people help themselves. So I've been doing some workplace mediation over the last 12 months and practicing all the things that I've done my whole life, perhaps. So yes, happy to be here. Thank you.
Wonderful. So look, we want to keep this quite informal and more of a discussion rather than talking heads taking turns to talk, but we've got some areas of focus, I guess, that we're hoping to share. So some of those that are attending are mediators, others are not and are attracted to what are these skills you've got to share with me. But I think part of the focus is also to remind you whether you are a mediator or you're someone looking to pick up some extra skills for your interpersonal communication. Sharing these skills, helping people to improve the way they communicate with themselves and interpersonally, is really a task that we can all be engaged in. So the part of our theme was really around negotiating a better future. Some of the skills that might be helpful, particularly for women. If you're a man and you're listening and you want to use these skills, we would really encourage you. We're certainly, as mediators, we don't work with or target any gender or anyone anywhere on the spectrum.
Yeah, actually. Can I jump in with a little invitation to the audience? I saw Joanne's already said make use of the chat, and I would love if people in the audience would like, if you want to pop into the chat what interested you in coming today or what you'd like to focus on and hear about and discuss. I would personally love to see what are some of the topics that are on our minds tonight. That was it from me. Yeah.
Actually, like Joanne, while we're waiting for those chats to come through, I really, from your perspective, they call the nonviolent communication. And that in itself implies avoiding conflict, which is, again, that's great. What does that look like in our everyday lives? Not only for International Women's Day, but for everybody in particular. How do we employ that? If we look at negotiating a better future, mediation, really, when you think about it as a concept, is to mediate an outcome which is resolution-based. That's really a part of our life. Even when we get to groups socially and we talk about where we're going to go out for dinner, would you like to go to Italian or would you like to go to Chinese? We have to negotiate those things. When you're in any form of group, there's always some kind of mediation skill to enable you to have a resolution which is a positive outcome. I think being a mediator is one thing, but the skills of a mediator are transferable across everything in life. And I'm really excited about being able to talk about that and how that's applied to give us all an opportunity to stay calm when we do communicate with people.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And I'm not sure with nonviolent communication, is it so much about avoiding conflict or is it about approaching it in a different way?
Yeah, I'd say the latter. Yeah, inviting what's real, what's here, what matters to everybody, and then definitely doing it in different ways than a lot of us have grown up with. A lot of us grow up with this looking for who's right, who's wrong, can we win the debate, who's to be punished. So nonviolent communication invites us to instead just hear what's the needs that's driving each side. And can we focus on that? And can we collaboratively work together to meet as many needs as possible? And everybody's needs matter. One of the key principles of nonviolent communication, which I find so helpful in my everyday life, is that everybody's actions and everything that they say, it's driven by some sort of need, some sort of universal human need like belonging or respect or trust or safety. No matter how tragic the action seems to us, and even if it is an action that's doing harm, deep down, there's a core need that's driving it. So if we can all try to understand what that need is, for me, that's the start when mediation or any sort of conflict moves forward to something that's so much more humanizing for all parties.
I think
And it's a concept of tolerance, isn't it?
It is. And Laura, you were going.
I was going to say it's a great segue into one of the skills that I think everybody can focus on and spend time thinking about in everyday settings, not just in a mediation or a conflict setting, is, to your point, really seeking to understand. And to do that, we need to actively listen. And I just wanted to call out how I tend to describe active listening is listening to really understand rather than listening to punch back the moment the person's finished speaking. And if you are ready to punch back, it means to me that you've not listened because you're just preparing the thing that you really came to say anyhow and you want to hit back on. So for me, active listening, it really ensures that full understanding of what's happened for the other person, the impact of the behaviors or the actions or what have you on the other person, but also helping you understand their needs, to your point, Nicole, really probing with some questions that are open questions. And I think many of us are familiar with the term closed questions and open questions. Closed is, did you? Yes, no. Very elicits a yes, no, or something very shut down. Whereas an open question really allows you to explore, allows you to clarify, and allows you to, prevents, if possible, or reduces, maybe it doesn't fully prevent, but reduces misinterpretation of what's going on with the other person. And so I think the way in which we ask our questions and then how we truly listen to understand, listen to respond, I think it takes us a big step forward to appreciating what's going on for the other person.
And it takes your ego out of it too, doesn't it, Laura? Because it's not about you. And having that respect and tolerance for somebody else's individuality is, I think, an invaluable tool to have too. Stepping back and being the observer and being curious rather than making assumptions. And I think we all do that in life too. When somebody says, oh, I'm feeling really anxious, we can then have an assumption about what that means. Or I have to have this, and we have an assumption about what that means. So listening with the intent to understand, as you said, is so important, but then also coming back with that communication style of asking questions that incite feedback through a curious lens rather than an assumption lens. We've all got a couple of years of us. We're all older than 15. So we have got some history. Sometimes I fall in the trap of, I know what they're saying, but don't, because we're not in their position. Listening with the intent to understand and then asking those open-ended questions, but through a curious lens, then the other person really gets a feeling that you're hearing them and then you're leaning into them. And again, they're core skills of mediation, but does that not sound like something we should do in conversation anyway?
Yeah. And that challenge of asking questions without an agenda. So when we're asking open questions, I have no idea what the outcome, what the answer is going to be. And as a mediator, that's something that we're totally calm with, totally cool with, because we don't need to know. And that's something that I think you can translate into other environments, because quite often people feel like they have to control the agenda. But if you're trying to push what you already know, then you're not learning new things, are you? What about you, Nicole, from your perspective?
One thing that's on my mind with this topic, I had a difficult situation with my partner on the weekend, and I was trying to do some open questions and just say there was a miscommunication, and I was just trying to understand, what was it that happened for you? Help me to understand how this impacted you. Help me to understand how the communication hand signals, what didn't work about that for you. And when my partner gave me their response, I noticed that I was self-regulating and managing their impression of me. And this feels like a really core piece when it comes to conflict, especially for me in personal relationships and with friendships. Can I be a little bit less attached to them seeing me exactly how I want them to see me? And maybe in this moment, let go of them understanding my good intentions. Just in this moment, I just want to fully hear them and fully understand what's going on for them, and let me just do my own self-regulation, because I've got capacity for it in that moment. If I didn't have capacity, if I was triggered or tired or worn out or just so not feeling heard, then I'd flag it and I'd say, I don't want to self-abandon myself, and maybe make a different time for the conversation. But in that moment, because I discerned that I had capacity to step back and really hear them, yeah, that was a little bit of a lesson for me over the weekend, and something I'm still learning, because I find that hard to every time to let go of them seeing the good intentions that are here. That's hard for me to let go of. So yeah, that's what comes up for me on this topic.
I think you're not the only person that's hard for.
And it's that concept of self-reflection, isn't it? It's being honest with yourself and giving yourself permission to reflect on, okay, so what is my expectation of this conversation and how it's going to go? Is it about them? Is it about me? And being okay with that. Being okay with questioning how you're responding to it and giving yourself permission to self-reflect and go through it all.
I think that the additional thing is that you are permitting yourself not to have to be seen to be perfect and have all the answers as well. And I think that self-reflection that you've just spoken about extends broadly into that. Do you have to show up perfectly every time? How do you just cut yourself a bit of slack and go, we're all human? I can't remember which of you spoke a few moments ago about when you're in the heat of it to be able to pull yourself and think through all these things. And it's really hard when you're in the heat of it, which of course is sometimes why it's nice to have an independent person present as well to help regulate all of that. But there are skills and there are ways to take a breath, just pause for a second. By the way, I think that the story goes pause for 5 seconds. And I often say silence is okay. Silence is okay. So pause, take a breath, because we all know how breathing helps the amygdala and everything else in our heads and our brains to regulate and settle down. Take a very big breath and think before we speak. And it's okay to not handle every part of every conversation perfectly, because it's hard when you're in the thick of it. And I'm not sure, Nicole and Joanne and Dee, you've got strategies when you're in the thick of something, other than take a breath or take some time out and say, or say, can we come back to this tomorrow? I'm just not ready to have this conversation now. But take a little bit of control to not be thrown in the deep end, to have that conversation there and then that you may be happy with how you've handled. So I wonder if others have strategies on how to just take that breath.
Yeah, I think what you've just hit on, Laura, is absolutely critical, because when we're in that mediation space, of course, we're a facilitator, which implies that it's not about it. So if we are being triggered, we're feeling something that might overwhelm us, we do need to be able to step back, because we're exactly that, a facilitator. In situations where I'm feeling that I might be highly charged or feeling intolerant, because I use the word intolerant, because it's sometimes there is an expectation as in, don't you get to see what's going on here? Can't you step back from your win-lose mindset? Is taking a break and saying, look, I'm just going to pause for a minute. Why don't you get a glass of water, have a little drink, go for a walk around, stretch your legs, and then I will actually self-reflect, which is, okay, what is it in me that's being triggered? Because it's really got nothing to do with the client. It's got to do with yourself. So again, I think the relationship with self, when we deal with the work that we're dealing in, which is high conflict, people come to mediation not because they're getting on. They come to mediation because they're not getting on. So if we're being triggered, and it could be if you're tired or you're not feeling well, we're not performing at our highest level, is to step away and have a break. And I think that's also important when you actually plan to do mediations, is to make sure you have actually got the clear mindset. You can be present with the clients and not be elsewhere, and to ensure not to bring an agenda to the table, your agenda to the table, which is to find a conclusion. What you were saying, Joanne, earlier, we have no idea what's going to happen in mediation. We can have an assumption that it will be about a co-parenting arrangement, or it might be, as you said, Laura, in the commercial space, maybe a workplace dispute. But we actually don't know what's underlying, because it may be one of the first times that the clients have actually had a platform where they're being heard. And maybe do we do pre-mediation, which is the intake, which is almost like that venting. It's so important, isn't it? And I don't know if you found that, Laura and Joanne and Nicole, that pre-mediation intake is critical, because it's that confidential, inadmissible space, that one-on-one, where that person may have had the platform for the first time to actually speak their truth and their mind about the situation.
Most definitely. I'd say that at the end of some of my one-on-one sessions with participants pre a mediation session, I've had a number of them go, and okay, even if this doesn't go ahead, I just feel so much better already. I've just got this all off. I've never had the opportunity to talk to anybody about this. And there's a cathartic nature of doing that in itself. I'm not sure if others have different or additional thoughts on that.
Just to add that, as a mediator, when we're in conversation with people, often they'll start saying something and then we think, oh, that reminds me, and then we jump into our story and we talk over the top of their story. As a mediator, we're not allowed to do that. We don't share our story. So it gives people a chance to actually speak without getting what they're trying to say hijacked, because we want to say our story. Now, we're doing that here because this is a panel. But if we were mediating, can you tell us a bit more? What's an example of that? What does that mean for you? Those sorts of things that actually help people to tell you things that they often have never spoken about. I remember early on in my career about this couple. They said, this is the best conversation we've ever had. And I thought, that's terrible that you need this other person there to do that. But it's a gift that we can give people.
Yeah. Actually, that's a really nice frame that you've just shared, Joanne. It's a gift we can give people. And perhaps that's something we should all be really aware of, that to listen with the intent to understand, using those words again, Laura, and not make it about us, but truly give somebody a platform where you're holding space with them. But sometimes there's a big shift just in that in itself, and giving people that permission to speak. What do you think, Nicole?
Yes. Yeah, I was just saying to these ladies before all the participants came in, I just came back from a 10-day retreat with a group of other nonviolent communication trainers. And it was very interesting. We had a conflict management system that we put in place prior to getting together, because we were all living in close quarters for 10 days. And there are going to be perhaps little things, impacts on each other that come up just because we have differences in personality and preferences and ways of doing things. So we had in place this system where if somebody noticed that they were impacted by something that happened on any day, they got upset about something or angry, our system was that you would go and find another participant in the retreat, not the person with whom you've had the impacts being raised, but a different person. And then we had a 5-6 step process that support person would walk you through. It's this holding space, empathy piece that we've been discussing here now. Some of it is connecting to needs, doing a bit of mourning. What would I have loved to happen that didn't happen? What do I think was going on for the other person? What has this triggered in me that I see as a pattern in me? And just doing that with the support person really diffused a lot of the emotional heat in that situation, such that we could discern, what do I now want to bring and share with the person with whom the impact occurred? I've got no sense of it being their fault that or they did something bad or wrong. It's none of that. It's just an impact occurred between me and another person. Nobody's good or bad. Nobody's right or wrong. It's just how it was. What am I going to take and share with them? And what's my intention with whatever I share with them? Is it because I want to be known for how I love to be treated and what works for me? That's one very good intention. Another intention could be, I think I sense something that's not working for the group as a whole. So I want to share this impact with that person because I think it will contribute to the whole, including that person with whom I'm sharing this. So this is just an example of putting systems in place that can really help us in our communities, in our personal lives, professional lives. I want to put something in place like this with my partner without trying to over-formalize life, but still having some support structures that we can lean into when our personal emotional reserves are a bit low. We've got these structures to fall back on and call in a friend. I'm not really one who advocates for a 2-person relationship, this nuclear microcosm of trying to sort everything out as individuals or just in a partnership. I'm so one to call on community, call on the village. I think we need support of each other. Digest it with somebody else first and discern, what do I actually want to bring back to my partner or this person?
Yeah.
So just a piece.
Keep us posted. We can actually get the book that you and your partner write about how to have the perfect relationship.
Yes.
I think we could all take a leaf out of that. But I love what you said about the support strategies and structures and put some framework around it. In my counselling practice, because I deal in high conflict relationship matters, and I use a lot of the mediation skills in that space. And in a number of situations with families, and it's normally got to do with children as well. And as kids get to the age of 14 and 15, the husband and the wife, turn into each other and they've lost touch with who they are because they'd had so much diversion for many years. They'd married, they've set up businesses or got jobs, careers, bought the house, mortgage, picket fence, children. And then all of a sudden the kids don't need them as much. So their role as parents is almost becoming redundant. They'll always still be mum and dad or mum and mum or dad and dad, but their role as parents is actually becoming redundant because the children are becoming adults. And then they look at one another, and then all of those things that they were attracted to when they first met become the issues that cause conflict in the relationship. And I've found over the years what has actually worked, and a little bit leaning into what you've just said, Nicole, is to help put together what's called a policies and procedures manual within the family unit. What about Joanne, you're laughing. It's a little bit like, well, if we understand what our respective roles are without having to remind each other, because sometimes it's just small things like, told you to empty the dishwasher. I've told you a dozen times not to put the dirty cutlery in the sink. Why don't you rinse it? And so those things become conflict in the relationship. So why not eliminate those little things and create a policy and procedure about it so that you avoid conflict? So it's being proactive in the space. So I've used a lot of the mediation techniques in creating the elimination of avoiding conflict in the first place. And it's actually worked out really well. So I have these people coming in with these big pages, and they've laminated them, and they've got highlights, and they've got tick boxes. I'll look at my policy and procedure, and that's your job, and that's your job. And they never talk about it again. It's on the fridge, and they just tick their boxes off. And then they have a reward system if it works well. Again, it's sort of conflict management, isn't it, within the personal space?
Yeah, and it comes down to rules. We make rules in mediation. We have rules about some of the structure that we have. But what was resonating for me before is our personal rules that we create around how we need to be. And I think women, particularly often, we create rules that are just absolutely unachievable. They're just so hard to achieve. I used to be extremely shy and very uncomfortable in public and in group situations. And I did some work on what my rules were. And they were, anytime I wasn't completely confident about what I was saying, that I just absolutely had to be the best expert in something to feel like I had any right to open my mouth. So I changed my rules. So now the only time I'm embarrassed is if I'm the only person naked in public. Maybe I might go to a nudist colony or something, and I don't want to have to, I haven't got any particular desire, but sometimes we make our rules for ourselves so hard that it's not possible. And then that creates the barriers that we find to our rules in our relationship and in our confidence.
Yeah, that's a big word, isn't it? Confidence. Yeah. And that really has to be something that we bring to the table in mediations, is the confidence to be able to manage, because quite frankly, it is very much about being unknown and being in that space. And as Nicole touched on too, and yourself, Laura, too, if there's that moment where you need to actually just step away so that you can recalibrate in order to make sure the best version of you is there. I think that's really important to be aware of, that self-reflection piece again.
Yeah.
I heard Nicole use the word empathy, and I want to pick up on one of the goals is for people, not mediators, but for any of us in our day-to-day lives, in the workplace or at home, to try and transform conflict into some sort of constructive dialogue so that you can to better understand and move forward. I think validating emotions was what I was thinking as you were talking about the empathy, to really understand what's going on for the other person and validate emotions without the conflict escalating, and really being able to advocate for yourself. I love your concept that you spoke of, Nicole, around almost testing it out or having a conversation with somebody else who wasn't involved in it to get another perspective, because it's really that introspection is hard. So for me, the way in which I see people best transform the conflicts into something more constructive is when they can observe what's going on for the other person and be curious around what is happening for them. Why do I see that physical reaction, that body language kind of reaction? Why do I see the tone change, the words change? And it is hard to do that when you're in the midst of a conflict, in the midst of a difficult conversation. But that's also the opportunity to just pause. And as you said, Joanne, let's just go and get a glass of water, or let's have a break. I actually worked with somebody a leader who had this strategy until we worked it out. Then it was very clear what he was doing. But we'd been in the middle of a very complex meeting with lots of moving parts. And he'd say, I'm just going to go get a cup of tea. And he'd leave the room and go get a cup of tea. And there were two things that happened. It broke whatever was going on. It gave a very clear break, but it also left the rest of us in the room without him. So then you can't all just stare at each other. So then we had to fill in blanks a little bit and chat. And so whatever energy was happening at the time just settles. And anyhow, it didn't take us long to work out that he didn't even enjoy drinking tea, but he often would call a break. And I've definitely used that more than once, where I just said, I need a cup of tea. Just head out for a minute. Everybody have a break, and we'll come back just to break that a bit. Yeah.
The circuit breaker. Yeah, the circuit breaker. It's so clever. And it's those non-verbal cues. We have to remember it's not just what we hear and not just what we're actually listening to and interpreting, but it's the non-verbal cues. It's the energy, isn't it? And being able to tap into.
Yeah, absolutely. Actually,
Mediations in person is still a whole lot better than doing it over video. It's difficult, and obviously in the COVID world, we did a lot online, and some mediations absolutely work very well, and some conflicts can be managed very well. But sometimes you're actually trying to resolve the fact that you do need to be in the same room together, and getting two people physically present where you really can observe the body language and be curious about what's going on with the other person. It's much easier. Sorry, Joanne, I interrupted you.
no, it definitely helps. I was just reflecting on what you were saying about breaks. One in group supervision the other day, he shared that he was doing a mediation. One side came up with an apology and he didn't stop and reflect, and he just said, oh, well, you don't even mean that. And he called another break, and this person had his wife there with him. So when they went to the other, what did you do? Why did you do that? So then that gave them the opportunity for her to say he'd reacted in the moment. He hadn't taken time to think, but making that extra space. Because, of course, if you make a real apology and it's rejected, it really changes the dynamic. And then they came back again and they reached a resolution, and he brought to the supervision, is that for real? Because he wasn't trusting that the resolution was like, it just became, like magic. That can definitely happen once you get past that blocker. We often find in mediation, it does feel like magic. Like, how did they start like that? It was a body corporate and arranging times to catch up, and it seemed like it was really a genuine shift.
Joanne, you've just reminded me of another skill, which I think is one we can all practice in our day-to-day lives, but we also use in mediation, which is playing back what it is that you've heard, whether you call that paraphrasing or the language, the name you want to give to it. But I think when somebody makes an apology, to be able to stop it and just say, I just heard you say, sorry, thank you very much for saying that. Play back doesn't even have to be paraphrasing. It simply can be acknowledging that you've actually heard something. Sits in my active listening bucket, but it's a great skill to be able to summarize. What are we actually agreeing on? So let's park the things we're agreeing on. Now let's maybe still continue working on the things that we're not. So an ability to summarize, an ability to play back, I think, are really key skills in diffusing situations. It's also showing your best self by saying, I've heard, I'm listening, I've heard.
Yeah, no, that's great. One of the things that Nicole introduced was about going to someone else and debriefing, preparing to go back into that initial conversation. However, we know from conflict theory, one of the things that people do when they conflict is that they go and enlist supporters who they can tell their conflict story to, and they can say, oh, yes, that's terrible. So any advice for, I guess, if you are the person that someone in conflict comes to, how do we be that friend that provides maybe not what they're wanting, which is validation and reinforcement to go back to the fight? We don't really want to be the guy in the corner of the wrestling ring or whatever, watch them with a towel and puts the Band-Aid on it. There you go. So thoughts?
I would, no, Nicole and Laura probably can answer this too, but It's really important to be able to give the person an opportunity to be heard. And you as the recipient, it's not incumbent upon you to fix it or provide a solution. And I think to remind yourself of that and to validate that you've heard that they're upset or they have a grievance. And it's as simple as saying, Nicole, I can see that you're really triggered or upset at the moment, and I can see it really upsets you. What do you need from me right now? Is asking them permission as to what it is they need. And in the majority of cases, they will respond by saying, I just need to be heard. I just want you to listen. And then you've closed the loop without making it about you. So it's validating the behavior as opposed to buying into their narrative and then asking their permission by offering, what do you need from me right now? And it's a really good way to de-escalate it. And you'll find that that will just bring down the energy. It'll be the circuit breaker.
Nice. What about you, Laura? Oh, and you've muted yourself at the moment. So.
Sorry, apologies for that. I think that's an awesome strategy. And it's interesting. Sometimes people, as you say, do you just want to be heard? Sometimes people say, please tell me what to do next. And I actually was in a situation not that long ago where I had to keep on saying, I'm not a lawyer. I cannot advise you what to do next. You may need to seek legal, but I can listen, I can hear it, I can ask you some questions that will help you be clear on your perspectives, your situation. I can help you prepare almost for that, but I'm not your lawyer. So there's also that fine line between somebody asking you for advice beyond what you should be doing. But yes, I fully agree that it's a beautiful question to say, what do you need from me? And if it's something you can't provide, to be able to say that as well.
What about Nicole? What insights have you got?
Thank you. Absolutely what has been said. I have what I'm going to call quite a spiritual practice with this. Within my nonviolent communication community, for a couple of years now, I've had consistent empathy buddies to whom I will go when I'm having a difficult time, a difficult situation. I will go to them for exactly this purpose. And what I love is that myself and my empathy buddies, I've got lots to call on, and I'll just call on one at the time. We've got a shared understanding about the structure of how we're going to support each other. And it makes so much difference to me to know that I can call this person and they're not going to be there advising me. They're not going to be there colluding with me. And the reason we don't want collusion is, which means agreeing with somebody, and it digs a person further into their opinion, which can be very one-sided. So if somebody's colluding with me and just agreeing, yes, that person is so bad, they were so thoughtless, so horrible, great, I might feel good, but it's going to dig me further and further into my position, and I'm going to get more and more narrow-minded, and I'm not going to see the bigger perspective on what's going on here. My goal is to get as connected to my heart and my needs as I can. And the colluding and getting stuck in the opinion doesn't get me there. What gets me there is when my empathy buddy just keeps asking, Nicole, yeah, what were you feeling at that moment? You were sad at that moment. I will hear you were really longing for more connection in that moment. I hear this was really hard for you. So those are the things that I most like receiving. The feelings guesses is what we call them. What was I feeling and what was I needing? And when I say needing, this is a very specific nonviolent communication term. The way I'm using it, it's those core universal human needs: belonging, trust, care. There's probably 50 or 60. It's not, I was needing them to come with me to play soccer, or I was needing them to sit down with me while I went shopping. Those are strategies, and they're stuck in our one position. So what we want underneath is the need that strategy was trying to meet. I was wanting connection. I was wanting belonging. I was wanting play. And when I touch on those things, my heart just sings and my body softens. And that's when I can really start to feel into, oh, okay, there's something tender and precious there. I get it. And now I can start to feel what was tender and precious to the other person. What was the reason they said no to me? What was the reason they did what they did? Because they were also trying to meet some tender and precious need, whether they knew it or not.
And they're beautiful, gorgeous. And I like the fact you mentioned that word, not colluding, because it's when you agree with somebody in their moment of trauma or negative narrative that unfortunately fuels the fire. It doesn't actually satisfy their need for being heard or their need to have compassion and empathy. It's then making it bigger than what it should be. Yeah, that was beautifully said.
Yes. Nicole is someone who's very special in the most awesome of ways. And I'm just looking, we've only got another 10 or so minutes. So people, you've got this wisdom in the room. You're wasting opportunities to ask questions. But feel free to use the chat if you do have any questions. What's beautiful for me is that we've been talking about interpersonal skills, but there's so much what we do as mediators when we're mediating. Often people get confused about mediation because they think, oh, we can talk, why do we need you? How could that possibly work? And it's these spaces, it's these opportunities to show empathy, to provide active listening, and where necessary, facilitate active listening that creates that space for something new to evolve and emerge. So in our last little bit of time, I guess, what are there final thoughts that you'd like to share?
Oh, for me, the final thought is that in any of the day-to-day personal life and or business life, if you can give yourself permission not to be controlled by fear, I feel is just a really great intention for everything you do every day. Because a lot of our needs, where you're referring to as well, Nicole, when you're looking for that empathetic friend, and when you look beyond the surface layer of what's actually happening, the majority of the time it's fear-based of one thing or another. It's fear that inhibits us. It's fear that puts us into certain trauma responses. So if we can have the intention that we're not fearful of maybe making a mistake or feeling a bit triggered, and putting strategies in place that can mitigate the outcome of the work that we do for our clients and also what we do for ourselves in a personal level, giving ourselves permission to have pause, to maybe speak to a friend that's empathetic or to have a moment to self-reflect. It's not to have any fear around that being misinterpreted. My biggest takeaway is managing fear as opposed to allowing fear to control you.
And by managing fear, are you saying acknowledging it and
Making friends with it, quite frankly, making friends with it.
the power of a huge giant that
Because it's a perception, isn't it? A lot of the time. Or you've just got to ground yourself. You look around. Am I safe right now? I'm sitting here. It is my thought. It's whatever my background is, all my programming, all my learned behaviors. Again, doing that self-reflection piece, which is, okay, what is it that I'm afraid of? Am I afraid of not being accepted? Am I afraid of making a mistake? And sitting with that and not allowing it to control you, but you actually facing it and saying, there's my friend again, fear. Okay, what's the worst that's going to happen?
you know exactly, and yeah, it's got roots in your old voice.
Yeah.
Yeah, wonderful. Thank you. That's great. Who'd like to share a last final thought?
I'm happy to, and then I'll pass to Nicole. For me, it's acknowledging that we are all different, and that is okay to have different perspectives and different needs. And the fact that there may be some conflict between two parties is normal life. That is what happens. And I'd like to, my sort of closing comments is acknowledge and accept that sometimes we will have differences of needs and opinions and positions and interests with other people, and take the opportunity to try and explore, listen, understand what's going on for the other party. And if that's through a formal mediation process or it's just yourself having that conversation, Nicole said, after you've maybe run it by somebody else and got some other input. But there are still D's word. There's a fear of, oh my goodness, I have conflict, or this shame that I have conflict with somebody. It's really normal. It's really normal. And it's really how we deal with it and how we approach it that can make all the difference. So don't be surprised if there's some conflict. And there are some great tools and ways of helping people solve them.
Wonderful.
To you, Nicole.
Thank you. I think I've got a piece that comes to me. A key takeaway, something when somebody is triggered, whether it's me or the person I'm in conflict with, we can't hear each other. So we need to go and get support before we even try to have a dialogue. At least that's the best case scenario. If we've got support available, set up some systems, get some friends enlisted in advance so that you've got these support structures. If I'm trying to express something to my partner that was painful for me to experience, but they are in pain themselves, they're not going to hear what I'm trying to tell them, and it's just going to blow up. And vice versa. They're trying to tell me something that was painful and I'm already super triggered. I've got all these thoughts of blame and shame going on in my head. I'm not going to be able to hear them. Just that as a key piece. And then, so go away, get resourced, come back together. And then what I really like is checking my intention before I step into any sort of difficult sharing something which I know could impact them and could be difficult for them to hear. Check my intention. Am I entering this dialogue in a relaxed and curious way? Are my feelings relaxed and curious? Am I open to hearing a no from them, from coming up with a request? Am I entering the dialogue knowing that I don't have all the answers, knowing that it's not my perspective is the only right perspective? So, yeah, I like those little pointers, checking myself before I step into a difficult conversation with somebody.
Yeah. No, that's fabulous. And just to riff off that, checking yourself, checking your rules and expectations. So what are you expecting to happen? What do you think needs to happen? And then think, why is that? Is it the socialization that you've had? Is it experiences in life that have created an expectation people are out to hurt you and you can't share what's important to you? There's all sorts of things. So I think self-reflection and self-awareness is such a critical tool guiding life.
Yeah.
If you've got friends like Nicole seems to manufacture and utilize, some people are listening and thinking, oh my God, how did she manage to resource herself in that way? Which is wonderful. Even if your approach is to journal or get yourself a counsellor and use a phone service, there are resources around that sometimes when we're in a difficult situation we can't see. And so my call out would be to look at what perhaps you're creating that's making a barrier for you, and then find people to help pull the bricks away.
Yeah. It's great work that we do. It's wonderful. And just the conversation tonight has just highlighted to me about how we actually utilize mediation skills in everyday life. And we'll bring it back to the original concept of this discussion today about empowering women. I think it's really important for us in this ever moving landscape of life and our position in society and life. It's really important for us to be aware that we can manage the outcomes of our own lives. We can certainly aid in high conflict areas. If you're in an industry where there are more men and women, there's a perception that it's now dominated. And I remember being interviewed many years ago, being in construction, and somebody asked me, how do you feel about being in a male-dominated industry? And I always said, I'm not in a male-dominated industry, because the word in itself is quite confronting. I said, I'm in an industry where there happens to be more men working than women, but it's not dominated. And it's very interesting, us as women can fall into that. We hear that concept, and you would probably have come across this, Laura, being high executive position in the organizations you've been in, that concept of ceiling. That's self-deprecating. There is no ceiling. It's, at the end of the day, we may have to try some other skills to get to where we want to go. But if we walk into the intention, as you said, Nicole, if we walk into any situation with the intention that this is going to be high conflict, or there's glass ceiling, or it's a male-dominated industry, there's a preconceived notion that you're not going to go forward because your intention is negative. So intention is very important in being open and responsive. And maybe the intention is the unknown, and that's okay.
Wonderful. And Courtney, thank you so much for sharing your takeaway. And I really appreciate if others would as well. But the empathy buddy.
Yeah, that's gorgeous. That was my takeaway.
And the home policy and procedure.
Yes.
Oh, good. Yeah, absolutely.
And a big thank you to you and Mediation for coming up with the idea to hold this session, even if we are a bit past International Women's Day. But thank you so much to you guys for hosting this and for giving people the opportunity, whether it's live or listening to the recording, to learn some new things and explore some things. And so thank you very much.
Well, thank you all. I've really enjoyed the conversation, and yeah, definitely, I think there's really value in just stopping to reflect. And this is something that you very clearly know, Nicole, and I think it's a really good reminder for everyone that, yeah, giving ourselves permission to take the space we need and seek out the resources we need. Thank you once again.
Thank you, Joanne and Laura and Nicole. Thank you very much. And thanks to the audience too. What a great session today.
Thank you, everybody.
Good night.
Yes.
No.
Thanks. Bye.